Welcome to the Can You Even podcast, a space where real life stories prove that no matter what life throws your way, you can. I'm your host, Candisse McCormick, and as someone living with spinal muscular atrophy, I've faced my own share of challenges, but I've learned that with the right mindset, anything is possible. On this podcast, I have the privilege of sharing stories from incredible people who have faced life's twists and turns, overcome challenges, and found their own version of you can. These conversations are all about finding strength, hope, and purpose, even in the hardest moments. So get comfy, turn up the volume, and get ready, because these stories might just shift your perspective in a way you never saw coming. Hello everyone, it's me, Candisse, and we are back with another episode of the Can You Even podcast, and I'm so excited to welcome my next guest, the lovely Jody Crawford. I'm going to pass it right on over to you because, like I say, nobody introduces ourselves like ourselves.
Oh, that is so nice. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I've always enjoyed conversations with you. We just lose time when we get talking, so it doesn't. I was like, of course she's doing a podcast. That completely makes sense. So, how do I describe myself? I would say that I'm optimistic, and I would say that I'm a leader. So I would say that let's go with charismatic, optimistic leader who works specifically with soul-led, ambitious, powerful women to move from a state of burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm, usually because they're going through some transition in life, some
Totally.
big, massive transition, into a state of peace, calm, and
I love that. This is why I let people introduce themselves, because I feel like if I would have introduced you, I would have been like, she's a mom and a wife and da 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 da. I know her because she was a drama teacher. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, that's all fantastic things and helped you be the person you are today. But like, that was way better than an average introduction. So nice work on that.
Oh, well, thank you.
So fun. Like I just mentioned, I've known you since like high school, which we won't need to tell everybody how long ago that was.
We
No,
were both babies.
totally. And so it's been really fun to follow you on your journey of being a teacher and then changing into all of the things that you do. You're so wildly creative, and I love how you are constantly changing, evolving, and really finding your true passion so that you can help others like achieve their goals. Part of the podcast here is that we all go through hard times, but I always say not necessarily that we're choosing our hard, but we get to choose how we respond to that hard and the outcome that will be at the end of that. And so I don't like to compare hards because I think your hard and my hard, no matter what people are hearing or seeing, is exactly the same because you're all going through the same feelings. So I think your like I get all my guests to fill out a little information form about what they'd like to chat about because I feel like there's always multiple things we could chat about. But I know a lot of yours comes from a mindset of kind of being misinformed by society of what success looks like in your life and how we have this like hustle mindset, very manly, masculine driven, and then how to like really change that to fit us for us females. And so I'm sure that going through everything you've been through to get to this point where you're offering what you're offering has been a bit of a struggle. So maybe share a bit of that and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Okay, for sure. Well, I think, of course, like any great story, and this is how my book begins, right? Is with any great story, we have 2x4 moments where we feel like we've been hit in the side of the head with a 2x4. And it's as awful as that visual is, there is a moment in the visual that creates a shift of perspective. Like your head literally shifts, and therefore you get to look at something completely differently. And when I knew you, I was a teacher at your high school.
Yeah.
And I was in my gosh, 10th year of teaching, 6th year. I can't, it depends how old we are. Like, let's just say I was still a baby teacher at that point.
Fair.
Or had some experience on my belt, but not much at that point.
Right.
I think I got to work with you within my first couple of years. And I did my practicum classes right out of there. So it would have been like 21, 22 years,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. um, there was a time when I began my journey where I was sitting on like 3 committees. I was running the cheerleading squad. I was coaching volleyball. I was running the drama club after school. I was putting on plays and performances. I literally got to school at 6:30 in the morning and I left at 11 o'clock at night. In
I
for
remember you were, like, literally involved, I felt like, in everything.
Yeah, it was a surefire way to have a job the next year.
Totally.
It's like,
Yes to everything.
yes. But I realized actually upon reflection that that was actually my life even as a student. So, like when I was in
Mm.
high school, I was president of the student council or co president of the student council. I was on the committee that ran all of the high school dances. I played every sport there was in high school. Like I just
Mhm.
like was involved in every sport there was because there wasn't an art club. And when I was in high school, it was a little bit odd. You could only take one arts. And so I took drama. Drama was my
Yes.
jam. And so because I could do that, I wasn't allowed to take visual arts, but I had this massive passion for visual arts. So I created an art club after school where the art teacher taught me how to do photography in the old fashioned darkroom way. I just spent my life doing. Like it was always about doing the next thing and being in action. And if I passed out at night, that was a good day. And it was like a way of being like self high five. And to the point where, obviously I rode that adrenaline wave through university and through both my degrees and into parenthood and then through my children's like little phases. And there just got to a point where I think my adrenals literally were like, enough, like
Right.
enough.
Yeah.
We cannot do this anymore. And I got sick and I was diagnosed with something that could have ended terminal. And I just was not willing to go down that path. And so I made this incredibly definitive decision and I took radical responsibility for change. And I was like, I will not end my life that way. And it was like this absolute declaration to God, universe, Gaia, whatever you connect with. For me, I've been using God a lot lately, as in that languaging. Feels good in my heart, but it was
Mhm.
like I am very certain I'm co-creating this life, and my voice is going to be heard right now, and that is not my path. And said with anger, and said with
Yeah.
alignment, and said with certainty, and I healed. I started to heal. And yet, I mean, it sounds so simple and like it was some sort of magic wand and all the things. And of course, it was terrifying
Yeah.
because I had all this neurological these pathways that were built since I was since I was like very, very little. My mom's just like me. So she, like we were all doers,
Yeah.
like magic doers, and equally equated doing to success
Right.
and doing to productivity and doing to what a fulfilled life would be. And
I think many of us can relate to that. We have these moments where we're like, even if you're just binge watching some trashy TV, you probably think a few times throughout that show, I really could be doing something more productive. But I'm like, sometimes it's okay to just sit and do nothing and be a little mindless. You know what
and
I mean?
were you productive at some point in that day? And what I found, like when I began this journey with the pink and blue solution,
Mhm.
um, we'll get into that later for those of you who are new to it. Um, what I realized was that, like, I thought this was just Alberta culture. Like, I thought,
Totally.
this is so Alberta culture. Like, where, there's a bunch of ranchers around here, oil and gas, work hard, like, yeah, just like giver, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very wealthy area. So it was like you had to do more to get more money so you could afford to live here and afford food and like all the things.
Yeah.
And so it was just double income was very common, right? In fact, almost necessary
Totally.
in order to make ends meet here. So I really believed that. And then I started doing more podcasts. Last year, I was on 12 podcasts that were international. And the
Mm.
more conversations I had when my business went international this year, I realized this is not an Alberta culture thing. This is very much a worldwide culture piece.
Mhm.
And there are societies that are built on the notion of success literally looking like how many activities and tasks you can fit in a day.
Mhm.
And the alternative to that is shame. If you do not fit 400 tasks in a day, then you are to be self-flogging and or have somebody else come and shame you for being lazy or not being a contributor, like on and on.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, like, you were sharing about how you were that person and then you got sick. And I think in this case for you, you were lucky that it was kinda like the blessing and the curse. But it makes you wonder, like, had you not gotten sick, would you have continued down that road because it was normal? Are you okay to share a little bit about, like, what section, area, time frame of your life was like? Like, how did you know what you were doing was making you sick, if you are okay to share some of your symptoms and stuff? Because I think sometimes we all brush it under the rug and think, "Oh, I'm just tired."
Yes. Okay, so first of all, have you ever heard of the term epoch? EPOCH? An
I
epoch moment?
don't think so.
So we often use it in writing to describe the pivotal moments
Yeah,
in
okay,
people's life, right?
okay.
So if you were to go back and share the epoch moments of your life, they're not always joy filled, but
Mm,
they're always shifting. Like
mm,
there's always something that's shifting. So I had the blessing of doing a past life regression with my cousin James, who does these for a living. And I fell into another lifetime where I got to experience myself living in the South, in South Carolina, actually. And I had an accent. It was crazy. It was so interesting. But I landed when I was about 5 or 6 years old in this body.
oh,
And I got to experience over the course of 6 hours of this regression, living out these epoch moments of this soul's journey.
okay.
And so it was the first time I looked up and really understood that some of the best moments in your life were the hardest. They were actually the hardest. And they were the moments where you were up against die or survive.
Mhm,
Right? And they were moments where you felt like your heart fell out of your chest or your breath got caught or you just thought, "Oh my god, how am I going to survive this?" Like those moments are moments that make the story.
mhm,
They're the moments that make the story. And so when you go back and look at your story, I can say like I sat down and decided that I would do a trauma timeline for myself. And I've done a money timeline. I've done, yeah, and I recommend this actually if anybody wants to do a really cool coaching technique is sit down and look at the traumatic moments in your life. And for those of you who have like whitewashed the your life as trauma, right? You're like, wait a minute, that's my whole life.
I feel like I would have pages
You're
upon
like,
pages.
someday.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Well, I honestly think Candace, even you who I know has had a journey and a half
Mhm,
in this body, has a ton of moments of joy and elation and enlightenment and beingness and all the things. And so sometimes when we're in that lower vibration or a trauma state, we can't see all of those moments. We put it all together as one singular trauma, you
mm,
know? And so, like, when you talked about, first of all, signs and symptoms,
mhm.
I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I got to a point where I
Is it
was like, God, I'm so, like, women will really, I'm sure, associate this, like, during their period, during that time
okay, yeah, yeah,
where you just get that where the cycle changes and your hormone shifts from the luteal phase into the actual bleed phase.
yeah,
And like 2 days before, where you feel like you can't even lift your head off your chest, like your
yeah,
whole body's drained. Well, on top of that, I had a circumstance, what we'll call it a condition, where
okay,
I would lose like a liter of blood during my period. And so my iron would drop and I would become anemic. And
right,
so for like decades, right? And so this became like a normative thing for me. When I was teaching, I'd actually have to get a sub to come in once a month
yeah,
just for me because I was so tired. So when I say so tired, I mean beyond that tired. Like I was that level of tired and then plus me actually contemplating if I said to somebody at one point, I was contemplating if I would rather just wet the bed or get to the bathroom. Like it was like, how can I convince myself to move from here to there? And I did make it, but it was a lot of willpower.
Mhm.
Like I dug in for a lot of willpower. And then when I got back to bed after I woke probably 12 hours later and I was still tired. And I was like, something's seriously wrong.
Right.
I'm still
Because they
tired.
always say, like, even when you are tired, like, people always talk about, like, "Oh, I just need to catch up on my sleep." Apparently, that's just, like, not something that you can physically do. It doesn't mean like, you can sleep for 24 hours and you're not necessarily gonna feel more rested as if you just slept your normal 6 to 8.
The telltale sign for me after talking to a sleep specialist was
Mhm.
actually they said to me, "Do you sleep well?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm amazing. I just pass out at night and then I sleep through the night." And they're like, "Wait a minute, tell me more about passing out." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I put my head on the pillow and I'm out." And they're like, "Okay, so you don't fall asleep." And I was like, "No, I don't think I do fall asleep. I think I just like
Dang.
literally I'm like, night, and I'm out." And so I push my body to the
So
point of
fun.
exhaustion. And so I'm literally passing out at night. And then they said to me, "Do you wake up energized?" And I was like, "No."
You're like, "What energized?"
So what a funny notion, the idea of waking up energized. Yeah, I thought it was a ridiculous notion. And then I realized the following question was, wait a minute, people do? People
Mm,
wake up energized?
mm.
And they're like, yes, when they have a healthy sleep pattern and they have healthy adrenals and they have, melatonin,
All the things.
these healthy hormones
Yeah.
that haven't been racked from being in trauma, fight, flight, freeze, appease, right? So in this sympathetic state, I mean, fight, flight, freeze, appease. I like to call them. They're like the stepsisters, right?
Yeah.
Like those are fantastic. Come on in, help me out, do the nice
But
things.
then you need to leave.
You gotta go. Yeah, yeah. Stepsister is a
You gotta live in that fight, flight,
terrible analogy.
freeze. You know what I mean? Like, living in that state 24/7,
Yeah.
not good.
No, well,
Yeah,
it breaks your body down. Like
totally.
it fully breaks your body down. And so
And that's what you experience.
that's what happened to me. Yeah. On the outside, I looked healthy
Mhm.
because I was chubby. So I had like extra, I wasn't like emaciated
Right,
or
right.
sallow, or
Yeah.
my skin looked okay in terms
Yeah.
of color. I mean, I'm as white as they come. Okay. So, I mean, this
Well,
is
like, I feel like
before
I've
the
seen you all through these years, and I always would have said, like, you are one of the healthiest people,
thank you. Yeah. And it's been
and
such,
you live a healthy lifestyle.
yes, like it's a high priority for me,
Yeah.
right? Like I walked every day. 10,000 steps minimum, like minimum.
Mhm.
I got to the gym. At one point I was in a bodybuilding competition. Like
Yeah.
it was like eating, super conscientious of making sure to get my proteins in. I know all the rules around being over 40 and bone diseases and
Right.
bearing exercise and like all the things. I know all the things. So doing all the things,
I'm
right?
still feeling.
Yeah. So here's the thing, when your adrenals are taxed, when your body is at that state of being diagnosed with a chronic adrenal fatigue, that was
Mhm.
the beginning of my diagnosis. Exercise actually is a detriment to you when you do it the way I did it. So I was doing an hour of exercise for somebody with a chronic adrenal fatigue. That is too much stress on the body.
Right.
So I finally, when I started doing all my research and wanting to get my body back, I did see a doctor who said to me, you do have to push past your barrier of discomfort to grow. So, and I said, well, how do I find that line? Because I
Mhm.
was like pushing so hard that I fell basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because I'm the person that's like, I love doing social experiments on myself.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll experiment with myself. Like,
Yeah.
how long can I stay up? How long can I stay in the freezing cold water? How long can I, like,
Okay.
I'm okay pushing myself, right? Because I'm an achiever.
Which really stems back from a child in our life of being busy.
That's right. And of like, oh, you could do one more
Push.
thing. Here, one more thing, one more
Yeah,
thing. Yeah. And then, of course, I wasn't just doing one more thing, I was in sport. So it was like, you want to be the best at your sport.
yeah.
So it's like hours of free throw shots in the basketball court. And like, that's what I did when I was sad or I was upset in high school. I would go to the hoop. I would be in my backyard. I must have shot 1,000 free throws, like,
Oh,
yeah, I became a really good basketball player, but
yeah,
also I had no idea how to meditate, relax, be at ease. Like none of that was even a part of my life.
yeah.
So I like it was it was something that had been ingrained in me, and I'm sure it's ingrained in a ton of people out there. And I do
Mhm,
think there's healthy ways of doing it because I love sport. Don't get me wrong, I think it's fantastic. I'm grateful for my mom putting me in sport growing
mhm.
up for a variety of reasons. Self-confidence, learning to fail,
Totally. It
getting
teaches you a lot of great life skills for sure.
totally. Yet I did not know or learn how to say no.
Mm,
And I think that was the detriment, is putting in my own personal boundaries around my needs because I was always about fulfilling needs for others.
right. So I'm assuming this is sort of like when you adopted what you're calling a feminine slow down lifestyle and mindset, which I'm sure that there are going to be women that listen to this and they're probably going to think must be nice for you
Oh
to
my
be
gosh.
able to do that, right?
Love that you said those exact words because I have a clothing line, a t-shirt that literally says must be nice. On
Want
the
to say
front of
with
it and
everybody.
on the back of it, it says it is, right? And
Amen.
yeah, because it's a choice.
Hmm.
That's what it really has come down to. I've worked with some powerful as a coach.
Hmm.
Now, I can tell you that I have worked with some
Hmm.
powerful leaders in their industry, top rate, top line. And of course, I've attracted masculine women who know
Okay.
how to achieve, put out the product and tap into all of their senses to experience all the things. Yet they don't know how to do is how to achieve that at a slower pace and with boundaries. And so I teach them how to do that, right? Yet I figured out, Candice, that I made my teacher's salary, my monthly teacher's salary, working 2 days a week from Costa Rica. And in those 2 days, I worked 4 hours. Sorry, what?
I was just gonna say, like, it is probably one of the hardest things to like consciously be like, okay, show me how. We're not going to that frame of mind. We're going to be like, yeah, right, lady.
Okay, fair
Because
enough.
it just, because we live in this very like hustle culture,
Yeah.
it seems impossible to do that.
Yeah. And you know what? I thought so too. I thought so too. If you would have told me as a single mom, because that's what I was at the time, of two kids who had three jobs, that I could do anything else. Candace, I delivered pizza to one of my students on a Friday night. On a Friday night, they answered their door in their underwear.
You're
I
like,
was
"Eh,
so embarrassed. I was like, and this is my last run, right?
right,
I was willing to do whatever it took.
right."
I was willing to do whatever it took. I was going to support my kids.
But I bet you never thought, I'm willing to do whatever it takes and it's going to actually be less than what I'm doing.
Never,
Yeah.
never occurred to my mind that it was even possible until I was forced. So when you talk about the epoch moment,
Yeah.
until I was forced to face my biggest fear, which was dying. And suddenly it was like, okay, I'm not ready to end this life yet. Like I'm not out yet. That's not an option. So what do I have to do
Yeah.
for that not to be an option?
Yeah.
Right. And that meant all the things that I thought I would have said they were sacred,
Mhm.
including my teaching contract, right? What the thing that brought in the most productivity and money for my
I
family and
even feel like just a couple years ago, you were still like holding on to some teacher stuff, a few positions before, like, as you stepped into this more entrepreneurial type lifestyle, because that is hard and it's hard, it's scary to
well,
just let go.
Well, what I have done is I actually immediately let go of my contract, which was
Right.
very, very hard. That was
Yeah.
it was a 10-year contract. It was in the middle of the pandemic.
Mm,
You know, my doctor was like, "Jody, no sane person lets go of their job in the middle of a pandemic." And I honestly was like, "I don't think I can remain sane if I stay." Like
fair.
I'm in trouble here, and I'm telling you I'm in trouble emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Like I
Oh, yeah.
was not happy, right? And I the one thing I do know from all of my studies, like I've spent 80, $90,000 on my education. Like
Mhm.
all of the certificates, all of the things that I've learned is that if I'm not well, my family's not well. That's what it comes down to, and I will do anything for my children.
Mhm.
So that's why I started personal growth and development in the first place,
Right.
was because I wanted to be the best mom that I could be for my kids, right? And so it became that. It was like, no, I will not be leaving my kids. So yet. So
Until you're, like, old and lived your full life and done
yeah,
all those things, yes.
I'm not certain. Like I do believe that we all have purposes and paths and
Mhm.
things for sure. And I have friends that have unfortunately left this earth early.
Mhm.
And I've mourned and grieved solely. I've had students that have left their life way too early,
Mhm.
in my mind, too early, and yet
Mhm.
probably perfect divine timing, you know,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
in their contribution to
Mhm.
the world, right? And yet, for me, I just felt like I needed to do something differently. And honestly, had I not created the results that I created, Candice, I wouldn't have believed it either.
Yeah.
If somebody just told me it, I wouldn't have believed it. But I mean, I had to shift a variety of paradigms. I
Mm.
had to shift an employee mindset versus an entrepreneurial mindset paradigm.
Which that is a whole thing in itself. I always say to people, like, I don't feel like I was put on this earth as an entrepreneurial spirit. I think I was forced into it a little bit because of my disability, because I tell you, I would be happy to be a Starbucks barista,
Right.
go to my 9 to 5 job and bring home my paycheck and have maybe a little less stress in the in my life when it
Right.
comes to employment. But I also think that because of my life and everything I've gone through, it has taught me skills to be an entrepreneur, even though it maybe wasn't the path I would have chosen sometimes. But now I also am like, I'm way too bossy to work for somebody else.
Yes. You know what you like, you know how
Yeah.
you like it, you know what it is. Yeah, it's interesting. And also I think we go through phases in our life, right?
Mhm.
It makes sense. I call it the pendulum swing.
Yeah.
Like I've got a girlfriend right now who's craving sanctity, sanctuary, and harmony. Well, what does that tell you about where her life is? Is like chaos, right? So she's in the pendulum swing of desire. And
Right.
like that's not bad,
No.
but for you when you're in an entrepreneurial part of that journey, right? Because there's different phases to that journey. I've got a great friend, Kelly Beveridge, who is a coach specifically in business.
Okay.
I've been working with her for the last year, and you know, there's a phase in your journey where you're in a growth phase, but then there's a phase where you're on the struggle bus, and
Oh,
that's because it's between that phase and the next phase, right?
totally. Yeah.
And so you learn these skills as you go. I'm not saying that an entrepreneurial life is easier. It's not. But paradigm shift wise, I know I can make money anytime, anywhere.
Mm.
When I was an employee, I deeply believed I could only make it from my employer, and they told me what my skill set was worth.
And when you could implement it.
100%. And
Yeah,
they owned my hours. And I'm over 40. I've got to tell you, time is my number one commodity.
totally.
It to me is all the things.
Yeah.
Literally have all the things
All the
tattooed on
things.
my body.
Yeah.
And I feel like when it comes to time, um, like it's precious, right? And
Mhm.
it's
I
also a
agree.
construct. So like it's something I like to mess with as well in terms of like playing with time. And conscious constriction is something I use with my clients, for example, when we design their energy calendars and when is the most effective time for you because it's going to be different for you than it is for me. You know, when do
Love
you
that you said that because I think, like, again, with the social media out there, we see these people, and lots of people will fall into like praising like the 5 a.m. club,
Right,
which
right.
is for you. Me, I'm like the least productive. If my brain does not function at 5 a.m., you do not
Relax.
wanna be around me, but you give me, like, 7 p.m., and I'm gonna solve the world's problems at 7 p.m.,
100.
right? So, it's just I love that you said that because I think we fall into these mindsets because it's what everybody's doing, but you have to figure out what works for you and your energies and that kinda thing, so, I love that you said that.
Am I
Can
allowed
you
to
share
swear?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to tell you that I actually was going to write a book called Fuck the 5 AM because I thought it was so
Upon the first copy.
I was so against it
Yeah.
for so long. Again, it was my attitude around it was actually about my pendulum swing, right? I
Right.
was not waking up with energy in the morning, so of
Fair.
course, I didn't enjoy it, right?
No.
So, however, since I have fixed my sleep,
Right.
when my body naturally wants to wake up at 5 AM,
Fine.
I thrive on it. It feels like such a gift.
Right. But
Oh,
to, like, put, like, the ball of success is only gonna come to you if you're up at 5 a.m., no, thank you.
no, no. In fact, one of my clients, we designed her 2 hour like window of success
Mhm.
between 7 and 9. And then my next client is 10 and 12.
Yeah.
My next client is 8 and 10 p.m. So,
Yeah.
like, everybody is different with their energy, where their highest desires lie in terms of like what they want to accomplish when
Right.
they're most in their best self,
Yeah.
you know? I heard
Yeah.
this term the other day. I wrote it down because I'm just like, as I'm talking, it's coming through that I should, or it might be worth sharing because I was like, that sounds, where is it? It's resilient. It was a quote from Catherine Lee. I don't know if you know her, but she is a remarkable woman and coach. And I've had the pleasure of being under her tutelage for the last 3 months.
Mhm.
And she was talking about this whole concept. And where is it? How dang. I wish that it would just stand out. But oh well, if it comes, I will speak
Yes.
it out.
Okay. I was gonna say, can we rewind a little bit, and can you share for the listeners a little bit about what those kinda different shifts that you made to go from where you were to where you are now? And then I think we should dive into the pink and blue solutions that you mentioned
Okay.
earlier.
That sounds great.
Okay.
So the very first thing I did was I quit all the committees I was on, which actually sounds easy, but it wasn't because that's how I relate to community. And community is one of my highest values.
Well, and I think with that too, I won't say like I can totally relate, but I can understand because I worked for a nonprofit organization, and I had a moment where I decided to leave that organization for very outrageous reasons. Outrageous on their part, not mine. But I had a hard time because those are like my people. They like gave me a bit of my purpose, you know what I mean? And so it is hard to leave things, especially for you. That would have been huge because you were probably on like 20 different committees or something.
I was on three for sure. And one of them that was really difficult was like the Arts Society in,
Mm,
Okotoks. And yeah, I really loved that group of people. And I like contributing to arts in community in general.
yes.
And so that was, yeah, it was a very difficult decision. Yet I was very supported. So that was nice. And then I had a difficult conversation with my husband about who is responsible for what in the house.
Mm,
Like I had 3 teenagers living under, and we'd always take an extra. So we'd have 4 teenagers kind of under the roof at different any given time, and who was doing what and helping whom. And I can say
not a
with
fun conversation.
it was difficult. It was an important conversation. And the interesting thing is my husband and I are incredible. We're not scorekeepers. Like if the laundry
Yeah.
needs done, it's done. Like one of us will do it. And we're not like, well, I did it last week. Well, I do that. Like we
Right.
just have that relationship. It's like, let's just get it done.
Yeah.
Right. Yet the difficult part was that we're such doers that instead of being patient enough to allow our kids to do it their way, we would just do it. And so it became another task. So we had to sit down and have a difficult conversation about allowing them to mess up and teaching them how important it is to actually get something done and have that sense of completion and work ethic that we
It should
get.
be a new course that you do.
It should be in high school.
100%, 'cause I bet you 90% of high school students are not doing their own laundry.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know how to do your own laundry? Do you know how to wash a dish? So although my kids had chores since we were very little, they were very, it was quite a minimal effort given the amount of work we had. And so we had to shift some things around our house. That was really, really
Okay.
important. And another piece of that was it was very common for me to come home from high school, teaching high school, and have
Mm.
20 teenagers in my house. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
That actually I ended up leaving the next year. Like, I was like, "I can't do this," and I also didn't want to minimize my teenage children's experience with their friends, but I had a very difficult time being in a city where the kids that would be in my classroom would be in my home. Like,
Totally.
there's a line there it was difficult for me to go, "No, like, I don't no. I don't wanna
Yeah,
see you smoking in my backyard.
no.
No, thank you."
Well, you don't want them to necessarily know what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's that element too that I found myself kinda hiding away in my room by myself,
Mm,
isolating or, like, not being comfortable or confident within my home. So
right.
we put in a bunch of boundaries, is that
Right.
was a really big piece. And also, like, the how long people would be in our house and,
Okay.
those kind of things, and it was hard for our kids at first because our place was big, and it
Mm,
had, the most room for all the kids, and
right.
we had a 12-foot beanbag in our basement that all the kids well, actually, it was probably 15 feet, and all the kids would set up their gaming systems on and have sleepovers, like, it was the household, right? That
Yes.
crash pad, and I always wanted that because I had that growing up, like,
Mhm.
our household was they called it the Crawford Hotel, and,
Love
our
that.
household was that, but I did not have a healthy enough immune system and or
Mm.
nervous systems to support that anymore. So we had to put boundaries around that. And then ultimately, what I came to was that I didn't have the mindset to support this because I wasn't in a community that supported it,
Mm.
supported rest, relaxation, and restoration as a whole. So I took the most radical thing I could think of was to move to a community that did. And so I bought tickets and moved to Costa Rica. I didn't even know whether or not my family was coming. I was
I
like,
remember
are you
you
guys coming?
doing this.
Yeah, like, and my husband's like, well, I'm coming. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And what about you guys? The other thing that we had to do is we actually owned a business, the Studio
Yes.
Meat, and we owned a physical brick and mortar business. And because of the stipulations during COVID, we couldn't run it. Like, we weren't allowed
Right.
to have people within 6 feet of each other. And it was a creative arts, health, wellness, and education club. So we offered classes and courses and places for people to do different things. And literally, they could not physically be there. So
Mhm.
we shut down our business. So that was another massive move. It was like, honestly, like a baby. Like, it was like that was our baby, right? So there was grieving over that. So like this whole state was all these different, I could say that almost each one of those was an epoch moment for me
Okay.
where it was like massive. And then I remember getting a call back from the school division and my associate superintendent calling me. And when the call came through, I was like on my way to Medicine Hat and I made my husband pull over on the side of the highway so that I could have this very final conversation, which was, I've done all the other things. I've left the committees. I've put boundaries in my house. I'm resting as much as I can after and before school. I'm doing all of the things my doctors ordered me to do. I'm on a very strict diet that limits histamines in my body, limits like all these things.
Right.
And the last thing is that I think I need to quit my job. And the weird thing is, I don't know where I'm going to get money, but I know that if I don't quit this job, I'm not going to heal.
Mm.
And I said, I think I'm going to move to Costa Rica. This is me on the phone. And I think I'm going to see if I can volunteer in a school there. I want to see if I can fall back in love with teaching because I love teaching, like, love it. Like, I was that annoying teacher that skipped to school, right? Like,
Well, that's funny because you must very much relate teaching to be in schools. But what you do right now is teaching.
Thank you. So at the time, my full identity was wrapped up in this idea that if I left teaching, I had to leave being a teacher.
Mm,
That I couldn't unlink it in my mind at the time. And I remember grieving and grieving and even thinking about it would make me teary-eyed, right? And I'd get
yeah.
super emotional about it. And then the first time I taught a class outside of school, which was when I was in Costa Rica, I
Okay.
was like, "Oh my God, I didn't have to leave teaching."
No.
Like, I didn't have to leave being a teacher to
No.
leave the system.
Yeah.
But again, a fixed mindset. And I would say that I typically had a growth mindset. But what I realized was I did in most areas of wellness, not when it came to money and not when it came to my occupational self. And so that was a massive shift for me, massive. And
Those
I've
are
done
big.
major work on money since energetically
Mhm.
and of course, what happens when you start working, Candace? When you start working on a particular area, what does the universe like to provide for you? Trauma in that area.
I was like, yeah.
So then I get this massive money obstacle last year, right? And I get to face it and put all my tools into play and see what I can come up with, right? In terms of using these tools and create massive change and massive shifts. And so we're still coming out the end of that one because it was a doozy.
Mm,
And my husband speaks openly about it, so I don't mind sharing it because he really had to stand up and face his shame. But he got caught in a Ponzi scheme,
mhm.
um, and it just literally drained us financially. Um, and then, like, there were so many emotions around it. Hard to say, like, all the things. It could be a podcast just for
I was
him.
just gonna say it sounds like a podcast in itself. We'll have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously, I think he would talk about it because the more he shared about it, the more healing has come with it, and the more people have come forward to say, "Me too, me too." It's shocking how many people um, have been caught in that way.
Yeah.
So what's kind of interesting, back to your original thought, was I made all of these like drastic moves that were very specific to my life. I looked at my life, and so if somebody was listening to this, if they looked at their life and went, "These are all the different roles I had. The one role I'm never going to give up is mom. That's not going
Mhm.
anywhere. It's staying put." Right? Or grandma. Like, that's not going anywhere. It's
Yeah.
staying put. So teacher, well, I could just do it differently. But I didn't know at the time, but I was willing to give it up. Committee leader, committee,
Mhm.
whatever, willing to give it up. Running that non for profit, willing to give it up. You know, like, there's just certain things where I was like, those don't define me, right? Although I thought they kind of did at the time. So they were variable enough that they could go.
Right.
So it pared down to what did I really, really want was I really wanted to be a mom
Mhm.
and I needed to bring an income in for my family. And the two roles that I identified most with was teacher and coach.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones I have degrees and certificates in. So it made the most sense to kind of follow that vein and see where it would take me. And then I looked for the other thing mindset wise is great leaders who've done what I want
Mhm.
to do. And so when you're in an environment around people, like you were saying, that there's people who are like, "Oh, come on. Yeah, I don't even believe it. I can't even believe it. It's not even
Yeah.
possible." That makes sense to me if you're in an environment of people that are all fixed mindseted, where it's like, well, this is only what's possible. We're going to play to this level of possibility. But I was immersed in a community of growth minded individuals. So everyone was like, all right, what's your first action step? Like, that was a completely different conversation. I didn't have the money to go to Costa Rica. Like, at all. Like, I didn't have a savings account, nothing set up. I was like, "I'm going to Costa Rica." I made a declaration, and then a side job showed up, and I was able to buy the first ticket. And we bought 2 tickets at a time, me and a kid, Mark and a kid. Then
Wow.
we're like, "Okay," and we happened to get on the same plane, right? And so the universe starts, I have found, to roll
Yes.
things out in front of you when you start taking action with certainty in that direction. So
Yeah.
then we knew ish where we wanted to go because we had friends there.
Okay.
So the stay came next, right? Like, where are we staying?
You really put a lot of, like,
Yeah.
caution to the wind, so to speak.
And that's actually not me. I'm actually quite a planner. As a
Yeah,
teacher, you're always
yeah,
planning and planning the next step. And but what I knew was that all the planning I was doing was actually making me sick. Right?
mm,
Like I was so worried. There was all this worried energy, right? So I don't recommend that people move. But for me, I'm a kinesthetic learner.
mm.
So that is one of my highest learning styles, which means I had to experience in order to have it inside my body. So when we moved into Costa Rica and somebody was like, "Yo, Chiquita, where are you going?" And I was like, "I'm just going to the beach." And he goes, "Slow down." Like
Oh, wow.
he's like, you're in Costa Rica. Like we move
Chill.
like sloth here. He said, I didn't even know I was moving fast, Candice. Like it
Right,
was like it was such a common part of how I faster, better, easier. That was how I lived my life. Faster, better, easier.
definitely.
If I could figure out a way to do it faster, better, easier. And I still apply that notion to conscious constriction and boundaries, like
That's fair.
within a boundary. Because once I mastered the blue, which we'll talk about,
Yeah,
then I had a ton of time for pink.
okay. Into that because I think you were one of the first people that I've ever heard talk about this pink and blue solution, and at first I was like, "Is this like a men thing versus like a blue job and a pink job?" Those kind of
I
things,
know.
but
Yes,
it's
no.
more than that. Way more than that. So, yeah, I think if
Hmm.
you can share on to that, because I think the bits and pieces I've read through your newsletters and things like that, I think that anybody that reads it that lives this kind of hustle culture lifestyle is probably gonna be like, "Whoa, how do I
How do you get there?
make the switch?"
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'll explain the pink and blue solution. So why is it called the pink and blue solution? So let's go
Yeah,
there first.
okay.
Because the whole book and the whole concept was downloaded to me from the ether. And what I got very, very clearly is keep it simple. Keep
Yeah,
it simple,
okay.
Jody. Right. And I was like,
Yeah,
okay. And so what I got was as an educator, what we do is we relate something to something that's already in your schema. That's what we do
okay.
as teachers, right?
Yeah,
If I want to teach you a new concept, I'm going to apply it to something you already know.
right.
So
Okay.
universally, we relate pink to
Girls,
and blue to,
boys.
and we relate boys to masculine energy and girls to feminine energy. So
Right.
that's the ladder, right? So it's like pink and blue. That's like the easy ladder, right? You could call it gold and green. I don't care what you call it. But
Okay.
the idea is that we operate in masculine energy, we operate in feminine energy. And so when we operate in masculine energy, we are experiencing the world with our senses. We are tasting things, we are feeling things, we are touching and seeing and all of the different senses, right?
Okay.
And so that is literally how we experience the world. So all of those experiences go into our bodies and we have a nervous system response to those experiences,
Okay.
right? So that's the doing. And those nervous system responses require energy. So to go do something requires us to use energy. So if you imagined that we were batteries, when we go and do something, our battery is full after we wake up in the morning. Ideally, it's not, but we'll talk about that. And then throughout the day, we begin to use up that energy, right? And so when I started to bring about, like, do all the research around the pink and blue theory, I was like, yeah, but there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can gain energy, like
Right.
AT. You know,
Shocking.
ATP goes into, it has a conversation with your mitochondria and you actually get energy, right?
Right.
Get away from people, right? When you're in a crowd of people and you can feel all the embodied energies
Yep.
around you, go solo and suddenly you'll just feel like there's some more energy. Typically exercise. If you feel energized after exercise, your adrenals are fine. Do more of that, right?
Okay.
So those kind of things will give you energy. Having a great conversation with somebody. Have
Yeah.
you ever left a conversation you're like, look, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
They've just poured love all over you and been like, look how amazing you are,
Right.
right? And so those are different ways that we gain energy. And so I really started to look at energetically what takes our energy and what gives us energy. And the more the more research I did, the more I found that any doing that we do takes energy. Like
Yeah.
that's our truth. It just requires energy to do it. However, to get energy, there's some very specific things, right? And we can consume it, as we talked about, but we can also build it by being in our feminine. And so our feminine self is the self of surrender and allowance. So this is where our dreams live, right? Meaning like literally dreamscape when we're sleeping. Also when we're in complete there remember I was talking about the sympathetic nervous system
Yeah.
activating when you're stressed?
Yeah.
And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which means, we're okay, we're calm, we can take things on.
Right.
But I say that there's another system beyond that called peace. And utter peace is forced when you have activated your sympathetic nervous system too long. Your body makes you sick and it shuts you down and it makes you go to peace. It makes you sleep,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what it wants to do. It makes you sick or gives you a disease or, disorder
Yeah.
or autoimmune disease, right? Like, and then you get shut down and go to peace. So naturally, this is a cycle. But what I want to support people in doing is getting to peace without getting sick, without having to activate it through, the body wanting to make things right in the world,
Hmm.
in an osmotic state, that whole idea of being in
Yeah, like through all the
osmosis.
stress and the
Yeah.
worry and all that. Yeah.
Yes. So what I do with people is I encourage them and I build calendars with them on putting pink, I call it dripping pink activities into their everyday, especially during dark blue seasons. So dark blue versus light blue is conscious versus unconscious. So unconscious doing, get up, brush your teeth. You were saying at the beginning of this, I was saying for those of you who are catching in the back end here, that I love Candisse's videos. If you haven't watched Candisse's videos lately, I love them. She has been actually just documenting her every day. And I was just saying, I find it interesting. I enjoy watching people mow their lawns. I'm the girl
Yeah.
that watches the videos of the cleaning, the hoarder cleaning
Same.
houses. And like there's something about completion and just the curiosity of how other people live their lives,
Yeah.
right? And so for you, you were saying that at first you weren't going to film it because you felt like this is just normative stuff. Like why would somebody be interested in that?
Right.
Right? Like it's not something you've put a lot of effort into because
Thought.
it's just your everyday.
Yeah.
Well, that's light blue for you. It's like you're doing it, but you're not consciously doing it. You've just
No.
always done it.
Yeah.
So, and also it's easy. Light blue tends to be easy, right? As soon as it goes into it's more difficult, you have to be more conscious. Something was hard. You said the other day, I should have filmed this because this was actually harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Now it's blue. Now it's dark blue. And
Oh,
so what
okay.
happens in the dark blue state is more energy is used. It requires more effort, more energies. And you know this because you live in a body that isn't full of energy all
Yeah.
the time. You have the spoon theory comes into play for you. For you,
Definitely.
you wake up with like 10 spoons in the morning and you get to very carefully figure out how you're going to use those spoons of
Mm.
energy, right? Whereas the average Joe has infinite spoons,
Right.
right? So, however, if you have an illness, chronic disease, overwhelm, burnout, adrenal fatigue, then you've got a limited amount of spoons.
Hmm.
So it's like, how are you going to, and this is where the pink and blue theory comes in, what spoons do you want to use
Right.
strategically? That's the blue. And where can we drip pink into your day so that you can actually bring your energy back up?
Right. And we're terrible at dripping the pink into it
Yeah. Well, as a
until we are forced to, like with health. It's let's be serious. It's usually a health thing that comes up, whether it's just we're down for a day with a cold or the flu, or we're diagnosed with something more.
even then, up until COVID, and I'm going to say like props to COVID on this one, people would
Kind
still
of
go
made
to
it.
work in school sick. Like
Hmm.
that was totally a part of our
It's
culture.
normal. Yeah.
You'd be like in class fevering,
Yeah.
fevering. And your parents are like, are you
Fine.
going to be at school right now?
Yeah.
Right. And that was just such a like common, like push yourself, push
And
yourself.
crazy to think because really, I'm sure if we all took, like, what, 24 hours to just chill, let our body relax, we'd probably be only sick for, like, 2 days instead of these, like,
Oh
what,
gosh.
14-day sicknesses and
Sing it, sis.
lingering, right? I'm like,
Yes.
just take 24 hours, right? But there's, like, that saying about how, like, your health we take your health for granted until your health is taken from you, and unfortunately, I think we all live in that, so can you give a couple more examples of, like, a pink like, what would a
Yeah.
pink thing be?
So in my book, I have 50 examples. And now since I've been doing this, since I published, I was like, oh,
In part
I
2.
can add another 20 samples.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
heard about one today that's called a ball. I wrote it down. It's called a pulsetta. So pulsetta is a contraption that goes around your neck and it activates your vagus nerve to bring it to a sense of calm. And so you're not doing anything. You're sitting there with your eyes closed and
I feel like
breathing.
this is, like, a disabled person's jam.
There you go. Okay. I love it. So, yes. So, I want you to think about this. Most of
Okay.
the stuff that you would do for pink is for everybody because it could
Oh,
be something that somebody coming out of surgery could do. Like, this is what I kept telling women. They're like, so, like, washing dishes, that's pink. I'm like, would you wash a dish right after surgery? They're like, okay, oh, what could you handle after surgery? Could you handle an Indian head massage? Well, yeah, that would probably feel really good.
well,
Pink.
and I think, like, that's a very interesting thought because I think probably struggle with putting the drips of pink through my life because I think I've had this conversation with you. I probably think that every person in a wheelchair is the least grounded person ever because our feet never touch the ground.
Interesting.
And so I was like, when I learned about grounding and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I feel like I need this or whatever. But I also feel like I had to make it work for me. And so I do struggle because even simple tasks like maybe journaling would be a pink.
No,
Pink.
it's light blue. Yeah,
Look at I'm learning people.
I know.
I was gonna say like lots of people will be like, do like journaling and just write everything down. I'm like, no, that actually takes energy for me.
Yeah. Because does your brain work to journal? Yeah. Does your hands have to work
So
to
like
journal?
a meditation, sign me up.
There you go.
Okay.
And for some people, initially meditation is blue because the effort of staying still and the effort of, and sometimes they'll go into visualization as well,
Mm,
which could be quite blue, like you could get into quite blue.
okay.
But acupuncture is a
Yeah.
really great pink activity that's super healing. Some kinds of massage. The kind of massage I used to do was like
Right. Yeah. Like mine's like very what do they call it?
therapeutic.
It's not relaxing.
No,
But
no. The first time I went for a Thai yoga massage, I was like, "Am I a pretzel? Am I a pretzel right now?" That is not pink. Thai yoga
okay.
massage is blue,
So
right?
would we think of pink things of like more as like being still?
Yes. Yes. So staring, you wheeling outside on a nice day
Mm,
and just staring at the stars.
okay.
Literally just staring at the stars for 10 minutes, nothing else, no phone, no recording it, just being. Staring at
Mm,
a fireplace, having your fireplace on, you could wheel over,
okay.
just stare, watch the fireplace dance.
Okay, this is actually crazy. This is like very simple things, and none of us
You
do
know,
it.
yes, this is what I'm saying. Like this is stuff that can heal you. Like when I'll say when God put this in my heart, honestly, it was like, Jody, it's so simple. Why don't people get it? I'm like, I don't
No, I was just gonna
know.
say like
It doesn't have to cost money, although it can. So like
yeah,
something like acupuncture or going to a float tank, or
but it costs you nothing to walk outside and sit on
it's
your
a
neck
question
and stare at
to walk
the
outside
sky.
and stare at stars. The other day I put a fish tank on my TV, just a fish tank, and I just watched for 10 minutes. I was fascinated by the fish and I just watched them. Like I just sat and watched these fish move, right?
That yeah.
Watching television and actually taking in information is blue, right? Oftentimes people will say to me, well, what about sex? What's sex? Is sex
I feel like
pink?
that's a lot of energy.
I said, it depends if you're just receiving. Like if you're doing
Okay.
a full energetic sexual experience, then that could be pink. It could be blue. It could be dark blue. It could be very strategic. Like people could
Mm,
get, out their toys and be
yeah.
all strategic with it. So, I mean, it would be completely up to the
You.
couple, right?
Yeah.
Or self, right? Depending on your sexual experience goes. So it might be different. So I showed two pictures of a yogi the other day, and one person was doing Ashtanga yoga, which is all the movement based yoga.
Okay.
And then one person was doing yoga nidra, which is yoga where you're in stillness and you're placed in these poses that are just held and they're supported too. Like you're fully supported in these poses and you've got yoga music playing. So yoga nidra, pink. Ashtanga yoga, blue.
This is very cool. I feel
You
like we
with me?
can sit and do all 50 and people would still be like, wow. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
this is
seriously.
a very interesting thing because I think like I said, it's those few examples, those are easy things to go and do. Take 5 minutes.
100%. And you would be amazed. Like one of my participants, she's like, how? Because her schedule, I mean, like it reminded me of my old
Mm,
schedule. I was like, oh girl, I see you. I see you. Right.
yeah.
And I said, what if, like, when you drop your kiddo off at hockey, what do you do? And she's
Mm,
like, honestly, most of the time I just stay in the car and sometimes I'll nap. And I'm like, perfect.
okay.
Pink. And she's like, what?
Right.
It's pink. That's your body saying it needs a recharge, right? So,
I love that because I was just gonna say maybe one thing as we kind of head to a wrap up is like, could you give some examples of like where people who have the jam-packed blue schedule, like give 2 or 3 examples? That was a good one. Because I know a lot of my friends have kids in some sort of sport
yeah,
and you're gonna wait. So like even if they don't want to nap, they could, I don't know, stare at the
meditate.
sky.
They could go to their
Meditate.
car and meditate 100%. They could listen to some just binaural beats, music.
Mm,
They could go for a walk outside and then stop and actually hug a tree. Like literally do some forest bathing. You know, for you, Candace, they've got these really cool mats. Looks like this. I have one
I love
under.
that you have one. Okay.
It's
Is
a
that a
ground.
grounding mat?
It's a grounding mat.
It's little.
Yeah, this one's just for your feet, literally just to
Oh,
stand on. I have one across my whole bed.
yeah,
But for you, you could put a grounding mat on your bed and double down
yeah.
on.
Well, I bought one,
Yeah,
and then I had to take it down a notch because I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll just sleep on it. I'll be the most grounded human in the." And it actually made me feel like a little unwell in the beginning.
interesting.
Yeah, and then I like researched it a little better because I just bought it, tossed it on my bed, and slept on it for 8 hours, right? And then I was like, I don't feel good. And then I couldn't figure out why, and then I looked into it, and that's why. So, but yeah, I think like
Just
these
so
are
you know, I sleep on mine all the time.
yeah,
And
you gotta build up to that is
I
what
was
it
going to
is.
say everyone's different. And what I'm noticing with the grounding mat is that my scars are disappearing on my body. So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just started researching all these different healing modalities, going to get a facial done. You know, you're laying there. Infrared sauna is another one.
Good one.
One of my friends bought a sauna sleeping bag.
Yeah, I've seen
I've
those.
never even heard of one.
I just
Right?
have been seeing those things. That's very interesting. And I think, like, really for me, the message here is like, you can do these things.
Yes.
They don't have to cost you money, and you can find 5 minutes somewhere in your day, right? Maybe, okay, would this work? What if you're like listening to some, whatever you just call beats, while you're like brushing your teeth in the morning? Can you do like the pink and the blue at the same time?
Okay, so that's our purple.
Okay.
So there's a chapter in my book called "Is There a Purple?" And so
Okay.
that's what you do. And I definitely encourage people to create a lot of purple in their
I was gonna
schedule.
say that might be like a easy starting point for people.
Right. Yeah, just
You
bring them.
don't feel like you're giving up one to replace another, but you can.
Right. So if you're doing something like that, it would be like maybe you're doing the dishes, but you're listening to some really beautiful music,
Mm,
right? And something that brings you at peace. And maybe there's no agenda for how long it takes you to do these dishes. You don't set a
right,
timer or yet you just like flow with, right?
right,
Or maybe you want to go paint or draw or do something, but whatever you paint or draw or do is whatever comes to you is just inspirational. So that's
right.
the pink coming through the blue
Okay.
activity. So it makes it much more like into the purple. I've got a girlfriend who cooks. She loves, that's what she goes to. When she's stressed, she cooks. And I'm like, wow, that's the dead opposite of me.
That's
Okay.
like a terrible idea to me.
But I think a huge, huge part of this, and I think this is really important, is that what's pink for you might not be pink for me.
Mhm.
Right. And
Yep.
so it might feel very uncomfortable initially in your body. The first time I laid in a hammock for an hour, oh my God, I wanted to poke my eyes out with spoons, like all the self
Mm.
talk. But what was really interesting was starting to pay attention to that self talk. Like, what am I saying to myself when I'm alone? Like, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, this is attainable. When I say drip pink, strategically, you talked about busy moms or busy people who are out there, whether or not they're moms or not. They've got these packed schedules. You could do something called bookending, where the beginning of your day, you make sure to add some pink in the beginning, maybe some like just flow with easy breath work. And then maybe the breath work turns to blue and it becomes Wim Hof. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's about stimulating and getting yourself up and going, and maybe that moves to some visualization, which also is purple, right? So we're in this kind of state of doing in our mind, and then we get up and going. But at night, maybe we lay on a Shakti mat. Maybe we lay with our legs up the wall, lay in a,
Maybe you get a red light blanket and lay there with it.
yes, a red light or a red light, right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
have a light that goes on. That's how I turn my reading time into pink is I have red light while I turn it into purple, sorry. So like, yeah, so there's different ways I bookend my days.
Okay.
When people come and work with me, we design a golden hour for them in the evening. What's that going
Mhm.
to look like for you? What's going to feel delicious and feel luxury?
Yeah.
What's going to be like a luxury, pleasure filled evening for you in that golden hour? And that's going to bring your nervous system to a peace state so that when you can fall asleep.
Yeah. I feel like you and I could talk about this stuff for hours. This is right up my alley, but, you
Yay.
talked about people working with you, so right now, what does that look like? Are you taking on coaching clients? Where can people find you? Where can they buy your book?
Okay. So depending on when this airs, is this
You'll be about February-ish?
February-ish? Okay. So vision boarding will be done by that point.
Okay.
So unless you can sneak in and get on the back end, but if you don't get to do a vision board with me this year, plan to do it next year because we do it in the pink and blue lens. And it's a very different version of a vision board than most people do. And
And do
so
you only do vision boarding at the beginning of the year?
I really do January and
Okay.
February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I used to do it all year long and I found that it just wasn't well attended,
Okay.
honestly.
Fair.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I obviously you can just go buy my book. So that's well, I'm sure Candice will just attach it in the show notes, but you can get it at Amazon.
Oh,
So it's
perfect. Yeah.
called Radical Responsibility, the Pink and Blue Solution to Healing the Ambitious, Exhausted Soul. And so that's an easy and inexpensive way of working with me is just
Mhm.
read the book, do a book club, invite me to it. I'd love to speak at your book club. That'd be so fun. But the second is I am launching a Vitality Collective and the
Okay.
launch is on the 28th. And it's a membership community where people can come in and we look at 5 life areas. And my coach calls them our sacred life areas, which I fully agree with. And you can come back every week and you get me live, which is usually a very high ticket offer. Yet I didn't want to price myself out of coaching for people. And I feel like some people just aren't in a position, and I know I wasn't for years, to
Mhm.
be able to afford weekly coaching, right? So I wanted to put together a group coaching style
Yeah.
that would be accessible for people. And so I'm super, super excited about that. That's coming down the bend. So that's the 28th and you can enter that anytime. So when
Perfect.
this airs, that will be easy enough for somebody to look up on my website, just www.attractenergy.ca. And then, yeah, I've got one-on-one coaching on my website. There's different classes. I offer different types of
Right.
times of the year. So I have one of the fan favorite is closing loops, which
Mhm.
is we look at energetic loops that are open in our life and we strategically plan to close them using blue activities to support us with this, but also pink. We get into the pink purple state.
Fantastic.
And then, yeah, I do another fan favorite is a deep dive
Mhm.
where I work with you specifically for 2.5 to 3 hours, and
Mhm.
we do a deep dive into your energy and where your satisfaction is in these different sacred life areas. And then we put a plan in place for you being able to move forward with them in a pace that works for where you're at.
I love all that. Well, thank you. I'll make sure everything is linked so that people can find you. Like you said, go buy the book on Amazon. That's great. And I look forward. I will be reaching out to you because, like I said, I feel like we scratched the surface on some good stuff here that I want to know about. Thank you for taking the time to come and chat with me today. And we will
Absolutely.
be in touch very soon.
Well, yay! Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody who decided to tune in.
Yeah,
It's like, you could be anywhere else. Yet I just fully trust that if you're listening to this right now, you were meant to hear it. And
absolutely.
so, and feel free to reach out to me like on Instagram or whatever and tell me what you took away from this. Because I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
So welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Can You Even podcast. I hope you're walking away feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to tackle your own You Can moments. If you loved this episode, be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps me reach more people who need a little extra You Can energy in their lives. And hey, if you have a story to share, I'd love to hear it. Head to itsmecandice.com/podcast to apply to be a guest on the show. Until next time, remember, no matter what life throws your way, you can.